Alice and I are always looking to be more healthy, and we were just talking about how fasting is one of the best ways to do that, but it's so hard. But the great thing about Prolon is that's not what you're doing. It's not that you're not eating for 5 days. Instead, you're using their science-backed program to convince your body you're fasting.
You guys, this 5-day program really is amazing. It comes beautifully packaged and it does all the thinking for you. Each day is its own box. And by following their program, I know I just feel so much better. And I can't wait to experience Prolon Next Gen and continue to see results. For a limited time, you can be first in line to experience the new Next Gen at special savings. Prolon is offering the Prosecutors listeners 15% off site-wide plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe to their 5-day program. Just visit prolonlife.com/prosecutors. That's PROLONLIFE.com/prosecutors to claim your 15% discount and your bonus gift. prolonlife.com/prosecutors.
Okay, so let's talk about the theories. I think there are essentially three possibilities. 4 if you divide the conspiracy in half, which we're not going to do. I mean, we'll talk about both conspiracies, but it's either a conspiracy, Karen Read did it, or the thing we'll start with, an accident, like a pure accident, not a drunken accident, but a pure accident. And that's that John slipped and hit his head. So basically, under this theory, John gets really drunk, which he was. He was really drunk. He was over .2 by the time of his autopsy. He wants to go back to this house. He'd been fighting with Karen all day. We know that's true. She had some suspicions about him and other people. He's wanting to go to this house. Bella's mom is getting mentioned. Jen McCabe is calling him repeatedly. And at some point, Karen, either because she doesn't feel well or she just doesn't want to do this, she gets mad and she says, "Can we just go home?" And John's like, "No, I'm going to this house party." So she takes him to the house party. They're screaming at each other the whole time. There's that whole period where she's sitting in the SUV and it moves forward a couple times. That whole time they're fighting. She's trying to convince John to just leave and come home with her. He's not going to do it. He gets out of the car. Maybe he takes his glass and he's so angry that he throws it at Karen, hits the taillight, shatters the taillight. Pieces of it float down on his clothes because that has to happen. And she's mad because he just hit her car with a glass. And so she throws it in reverse. She backs up, but she doesn't hit him. And she takes off. And he's like, "Argh." But then as he's turning around, he slips, he falls. And because he's so drunk, he doesn't even stop his fall. And he just whacks his head as hard as you can imagine. Maybe on the curb, maybe on the frozen ground. Maybe he's not unconscious immediately. He sort of crawls to wherever he ends up, and that's where he is, and he dies. The injuries to his arms are caused by a scavenger, or maybe that curious dog we talked about earlier. Everything else is just dumb luck, or dumb unluck, I guess, for really everyone involved, from Karen to the people in the house. The taillight shards in his clothes just kind of get there. Karen's behavior, the DNA on the taillight, I mean, whatever. All this stuff, it's just really bad luck. Now, it seems unlikely that without something like a car striking John, that he could slip and fall and hit his head hard enough to shatter the back of his head. But this is the only non-conspiracy, non-Karen Read theory that you really have. Not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because as we go through the other stuff, I think it's going to become pretty clear that this is highly unlikely. But this is something that I think you at least have to keep in the back of your head as we're going through the evidence, because it is something that people who don't believe the conspiracy but think either Karen Read didn't do it or just that the Commonwealth didn't really prove what happened. This is sort of the backup to what could have happened that didn't involve Karen.
Yeah, that's a great point. A lot of people who don't fully know which side to believe, they think that this is like the neutral ground or somehow splitting the baby. But look at the evidence. An accident, a pure accident where there's no contact whatsoever with any car, specifically Karen's car, and John, is unlikely. We'll get into that in the next theory. So let's move on. The next theory, obviously one that we've talked about a lot and is the defense's theory, is that the group conspired to attack John. And this group, we listed about 25 people, whatever your group is, conspired to cover up an accident. So it could be one of them, a planned hit or an accident happened and they're going to cover for one of their own. So the defense theory is that the group conspired to kill John. That's why they focus on the play fighting at the bar that we saw over and over on the security footage. It's why they asked multiple witnesses about luring John to the bar and then trying to separate Karen and John on their way to the house. It's why they talk about the basement so much and the possibility that Colin Albert slipped into the basement to wait on John when other members of the house party thought he'd simply left the party altogether. Now, this is not a mistake. The defense is smart enough to know that the preferred alternative theory, that there was an accident and the group was merely covering it up, because then you don't have to assign this like terrible, killing of their own in the police force sort of theory on them, is even less likely than a planned attack. And this is true for a couple reasons. First, if there was an accident, then the conspiracy has to include everyone at the house, including Brian Albert Jr., Sarah Levinston, and Julie Nagel. If John made it into the house and spent any time there before he suffered some sort of an accident, then these people would have seen him. His phone would have put him into the house. And that, honestly, I think that is a more palatable conspiracy to people, but the evidence just doesn't bear out. And so the defense decided not to go with it because it was really hard to tell that story. So they decided to go full conspiracy. As Brett said last time, you never go full conspiracy. Well, they went full conspiracy. And this is not an accident, but rather this was not an accident, but rather a planned attack. Okay, so we're a full conspiracy here.
And what's interesting about the accident theory is we will have people who criticize us for trying to say how large this group of people are. And they'll say, no, you guys keep saying it has to be half the city. And in fact, it could have been these couple people. Well, if it's those couple people, then it is a pre-planned conspiracy. So it's very interesting. Either you have to have like a just really wild conspiracy where it's pre-planned and they decided they were going to attack John that night. Or if it's an accident, the conspiracy has to be huge because all these people who would have seen him just naturally in the course of the night are now lying about it. They're lying about it to cover it up, what happened, and to frame Karen. Some people have said, it's not a conspiracy, it's just a cover up. That is a conspiracy. The conspiracy to cover it up and blame someone else is a conspiracy. That's the heart of what's going on here. So that's the first thing. Second, Jen McCabe and Karen's phone usage seems to make an accident impossible. Karen dropped John off no later than 12:32-ish. She was back at the house at 12:36, and she was calling him at 12:33, so 1 minute later. But unlike earlier in the night, despite the fact she calls him over and over and over again, John never rejects her calls, and he never texts her to tell her he's not going to answer. This would at least indicate that he could not do so because he was already incapacitated. Then there are Jen's calls and texts. Jen is texting hello and where are you by 12:40. If there's one person who would definitely know if John walked into that house, it's Jen. So if there was an accident, it had to happen almost immediately. In fact, it had to happen so fast that by 12:40, John has been severely injured. The group has decided not to help him. They have begun to put in place a cover-up that begins with John having never entered the house, a cover-up that starts when Jen texts John at 12:40. All of that, the accident, the decision, the plan, and the texting has to happen between 12:32 and 12:40.
And then there's the mindset of the group. Assume there was an accident right after Karen dropped John off at the house. We know two things about it. First, it was not so serious that he would have died immediately. And second, the majority of the damage to John was to the rear of his head and his arm. Now, assuming the dog jumped on John and scratched up his arm, though it didn't violently latch on, as even the defense's own expert acknowledges that the dog bite was not one of the more serious kinds you would see and did not cause damage on both sides of the arm as you'd expect when you see a top jaw and a bottom jaw lock, and then knocked John down the stairs, you'd have to believe that this group of people made up of cops, their families, and unrelated young people decided that rather than call an ambulance, they would dump John in the snow to die in the cold. And then none of them would crack over the next few years, despite the horrible trauma this would represent. And despite the fact this would have happened very, very quickly. Jen delayed checking to see how long it would take to die in the cold until 2:27, when this would have happened closer to 12:30. And she still Googled "It's raining men," despite her friend, very close friend, is lying in the snow, freezing to death outside. Meanwhile, lucky the snowplow driver didn't see John outside, even though he would have had to have been there by then if this were merely an accident.
So the pre-planned conspiracy theory at least pushes the timeline back some, and it makes some of these problems go away, but it introduces others. To be true, it must be the case that the group planned to attack John, a Boston police officer, for some unknown reason. It's hard to imagine that they did not intend to kill him, since to do otherwise would open them to all sorts of prosecution. If you lure a cop to your house and beat him halfway to death, there are going to be questions. And there's obviously the possibility that you're going to be arrested. Now, what's interesting, though, is they chose to launch this attack on Brian Albert Jr.'s birthday, while people who were not members of the family were present. And in fact, they invited numerous other unrelated people to attend the party, people who were only not present because they chose not to attend. These people included Karen Read herself, who was only not in the house because she decided to go home. The other people in the house either did not hear the attack, an incredible risk to take if you are one of the conspirators, or were aware of the attack and have been keeping that secret ever since. They completed this attack while avoiding any defensive or offensive wounds themselves, and without John displaying the kind of defensive or offensive wounds you'd expect from a trained officer fighting for his life.
Then there's the incredible luck of the conspirators. John's phone, despite having to have been in the house with John when he was killed, did not register that he entered the home. If it had, the entire conspiracy would be undone. In fact, the phone stopped registering movement immediately after Karen dropped him off, another tremendous stroke of technological luck. Then there's Karen herself. Despite having no idea that the conspirators had chosen to beat John and dump him in the snow to frame Karen for hitting him, Karen immediately assumed she'd done just that the next morning when she wakes up. She told people she thought John was dead, and she even speculated that he could have been struck by a snowplow. Now, her rear headlight was shattered, presumably by John throwing a drink at her taillight, leaving broken taillight pieces in exactly the place they need to be for her to have struck him accidentally or not accidentally the night before. This event also apparently deposited taillight pieces in John's clothing, and in another stroke of luck, John's DNA ended up on the taillights. But DNA from the dog the group used to attack did not end up on his clothes. And speaking of his phone, remember, don't forget the last episode when we read ad nauseum the text and call records of Karen and John. John hadn't been planning to be with this group that night at all. And really, he was with this group because of Karen. But Karen is decidedly not part of this conspiracy.
Yeah, when they gave the high sign, it's time to go. When that happened is unclear, but you're right. I mean, there was some amount of, we're going to plan this for a time where it's convenient, and then this is our opportunity. We're going to lure him back to Brian Jr.'s party, which, I mean, talk about parents of the year award and to the year award. We're going to use his birthday as a time to murder this man. They decide to do that almost on the fly, but they have this whole thing planned out, and just this incredible luck of everything happening with Karen that just so happens to fit with the cover-up that they want to put in place. And I know that's a lot, but the incredible luck continues. The group dumped the body just where it would need to be if Karen struck him. Karen just so happened to accelerate backwards that night at the incredible speed of 24 miles per hour. If you don't think that's fast, try it. I have been trying it basically since we've done this. I have still not gotten up to it. It is terrifying. I cannot imagine doing that under any circumstances unless I just was so angry or so drunk I wasn't thinking. And Karen just so happened to get very angry the night before at John, making her look like an angry killer, an angry drunken killer. Though despite leaving multiple profane messages, she never yelled at John for throwing a drinking glass at her SUV, which if she had done would also have undone the conspiracy. Imagine if she had said that. on one of the phone calls, the whole conspiracy starts to fall apart. And all these people involved in this conspiracy never cracked at all. Despite the defense investigation and an FBI investigation uncovering all sorts of evidence of Trooper Proctor's malfeasance, they never found anything in Jen McCabe's phone or in their investigation that would actually tie any of these people to this crime. They were never able to definitively show that any of this happened, or even to raise enough evidence of a conspiracy that this attempt to convict Karen Read could not continue. And if the FBI had found evidence of a conspiracy, you can guarantee this trial would not have moved forward. And Trooper Proctor, despite being incredibly negligent in his own phone usage, managed to plant taillight pieces, transfer DNA, delete ring camera evidence, and do whatever other things the conspiracy requires without leaving a single trace of himself. These are the things you have to believe for this to be a conspiracy.
So, what are we left with? Karen did it. What do you have to believe that Karen killed John? You'd have to believe that Karen Read, who had at least 4 vodka tonics and at least 5 shots of alcohol in a short period of time, was drunk that night. You have to believe that Karen's car recorded a rapid backup, more than 24 miles an hour from standstill, because Karen Read accelerated that quickly when she hit John. You'd have to believe that Karen, who called John more than 50 times between 12:33 and 6 a.m. and left messages saying she hated him, was very, very angry at 12:32 a.m. when the reverse would have taken place.
You have to believe that Karen Read, when she said she hit, may have hit, could have hit John, said that because she did indeed hit him. You have to believe that Karen saw John's body underneath the snow when no one else did, because Karen Read hit him and knew where his body would be found. You have to believe that John had pieces of taillight embedded in his clothes because Karen Read hit him. You have to believe that John's DNA was on broken pieces of taillight because Karen Read hit him. You have to believe that a hair matching John was frozen to Karen's bumper because Karen Read hit him.
And you have to believe that taillight pieces, John's shoe, and a broken drinking glass were found in the snow the same day as John's body because Karen hit him, rather than because they were planted there. You have to believe that Karen panicked after waking up and not finding John, despite dropping him off the night before at a party and having no reason to be concerned, because Karen Read hit him. You have to believe that Karen called Carrie Roberts and told her John was dead before 5 a.m. and before she'd even left the house or had any reason to think John was dead, because Karen Read hit him. You have to believe that Karen told John's daughter that John might have been hit by a snowplow before she had any indication that anything had happened to John, because Karen Read hit him.
You have to believe that Karen's first thought was that John was dead instead of asleep on someone's couch after a night of drinking, because in fact, Karen Read hit him. You have to believe that an unusual side swipe strike made it difficult, if not impossible, for accident reconstructionists to recreate this accident. You have to believe that Karen described just such a side swipe strike to her father and Aiden Kearney, Turtle Boy, because that is in fact what happened. You'd have to believe that the supposed conspirators called and texted each other not to plan the cover-up, but to discuss the death of a friend in their front yard.
You have to believe that whatever caused John's injuries to his arm, it wasn't a dog attacking him as part of his death. You'd have to believe that all the people who were in or around the house and said that John never entered the house said that because John never entered the house. You'd have to believe that the fact John's cell phone data says he never entered the house is because he never entered the house. You'd have to believe that Brian Albert and Brian Higgins changed their phones either because they were upgrading them or because they didn't want a defense team trying to frame them to get their hands on them.
You'd have to believe that Michael Proctor acted horrifically because he believed Karen Read killed a cop, not because he had decided to frame an innocent woman for someone else's crime. You have to believe that the reason no evidence of the conspiracy was found on the phone of Jen McCabe by either the state police or the FBI is not because she is a technological wizard, but because no such evidence exists. And you'd have to believe that when Brian Albert said that he wished that John and Karen had come into the house that night, that he absolutely meant it. Because if that were true, John would still be alive today, and Karen Read wouldn't have hit him.
And that's everything you'd have to believe that Karen Read hit him.
And look, I mean, this is one that I think at the end of the day, everybody's going to have to make a decision for themselves about what exactly happened and what exactly is more likely. You've watched the trial. You've listened to us. I don't want to speak for Alice. I'll give you sort of my 30,000 foot view of what happened. I've already kind of said this. Based on the evidence, let me say this. Based on the evidence, if I was on the jury, I think it is likely that she's guilty of second-degree murder. I don't know that they were able to show enough to show beyond a reasonable doubt that she was guilty of second-degree murder. There are pieces of evidence that point that way, but her drinking, she drank so much. And some of the stuff she did makes me think that she either didn't realize how hard she'd hit him. I think she knew she hit him. But I think she either didn't realize how hard she hit him or she didn't realize what the consequences would be. All the calling, all the texting. I feel like that, to me, is not the kind of thing you saw, say, in the Scott Peterson case, where you have a call that is very clearly meant to create an alibi. I mean, these are angry calls. You know, the fact that she, the next morning, drove by Fairview, I think was her confirming that the thing she woke up and realized was true, which is that she had hit John. Whether or not that fact that she didn't stop at that point and call the police turns it into second-degree murder, I mean, I don't know. I just think second-degree murder is hard to prove. And honestly, I don't feel like the Commonwealth really focused on that. The Commonwealth really focused on proving she was drunk and proving she hit him. And I think they proved that despite the jury's non-verdict. I definitely would have found her guilty of that. I definitely would have found her guilty of leaving the scene. I don't know that I could have got there on second-degree murder, even though in my heart, I think she probably knew enough of what she was doing to actually be culpable for second-degree murder.
Only slight degree from you, Brett. She absolutely hit him. I think that is, the evidence is there. She absolutely hit him. Then the question is whether she intended to do so, if she was too drunk to know what she did. And here's what I think happened. I think that there is a case for murder too. And I think simply the Commonwealth just didn't present enough evidence to show that it was murder too. Because based on, we listened to all the testimony, it's a little hard to get to murder too. But there are certain nuggets, and it's not because the evidence isn't there. I think the Commonwealth simply didn't pursue it enough in this particular case because they were so focused on disproving the conspiracy. So if they were to stick with murder two, which honestly I think the best case for them, they should just drop murder two, because a jury, I think no matter what, with a defendant who is somewhat likable in the sense that she's pretty and she doesn't look like a killer, you're going to have probably some holdout who says, I don't know, she hit him, she killed him, but I don't know if she intended to kill him, so murder two is hard for me to get no matter what your evidence is. I think you have dead to rights that she hit him, so you can prove all the other lesser included charges. Drop murder too. Don't make this harder on yourself, especially with all of the media circus around it. But with that said, I think the evidence actually is there for murder too at certain points, because at certain points she has moments of lucidity, and then the morning of, around the 5 to 6 a.m. period before they ultimately find John's body, that is her period of figuring out what her story is going to be, and that completely shifts what's happening in her mind. What I think happened that night, I don't think she was too drunk to know what she was doing. I think she intended to accelerate from 0 to 24 because she knew John was behind her, and she intended to hit him, and she intended to peel out of there, and she said, F it, I don't care, because I'm so effing mad at you. Look at my 1,000 texts to you today. I've been mad at you, not just today, but for many days, because these darn kids are getting in the way of our relationship, and I didn't sign up to be a stepmother, and all I want is to go to Cabo with you and have fun, and instead I have to think about donuts and whether I can give them sugar and blah-de-blah-de-blah. Oh, this is not the life I signed up for, so F you, John. Hit him, good. That SOB deserved it. Drove off. Kind of like if you've ever been so drunk, not that I have been, but if you've been so drunk and you do something stupid, but you're fully aware what you're doing, like you take off your pants at a party, or you flash someone, right? You do something you totally know what you're doing, but your capacity to feel embarrassment or remorse is incredibly low. So you go streak the colonnade. I've never heard of anyone doing that before. But you do things that you wouldn't normally do in your daily life, but because your inhibitions are incredibly lowered because of those 9 drinks you've had that night, fine, say it's 5 drinks, whatever it is, you're well over the legal limit. So your effort bar is much lower, though you are fully aware of what you're doing. And what's happening throughout the night is not that she didn't know she hit him or left him for dead. It's that the effort bar was too low. And as she sobered up, and the reality of what she's done, suddenly she's like, holy crap, I took off my pants at the bar. That was a stupid thing to do. Oh my gosh, all my coworkers were there. I'm not saying she did that. I'm using an analogy to why you would do something that you normally wouldn't do in public when you're very drunk. And she's beginning to realize what has happened. And that effort bar is climbing up because she's getting more and more sober, not just because her blood alcohol level is literally being processed out of her body, but because the cold, hard daylight is coming through and she can't kind of be in that heat of the anger that she was in because they got in a fight. They got in a fight over what's her name's mom as part of the directions that Jen McCabe was giving him. That's what the fight was about, right? She was steamed and she was in her rage. And we saw her in her periods of rage from the text messages. When she's in that period of text message rage, you see how she won't take no for an answer and she doesn't care. And she went to that extreme place at the moment she accelerated to 24. And that's why I think she murdered him. And it wasn't just a drunken accident or that she didn't know she hit him. She knew she hit him. She even kind of wanted to hit him. Doesn't really matter if you intend for someone to die when you have those actions that you intently take. Just like we talked about, you can fire a gun into a crowd. Didn't mean to kill anybody. Happened to just kill this upstanding citizen. Well, didn't want to kill upstanding citizen Bob. Doesn't matter. Still murder. And I think that's what was happening in her mind. And I think the text and call pattern throughout the day and the way she acts that night around 12:30, going into 5 a.m. when she begins to freak out to John's daughter, begins to show all of this taking place, her trying to create an alibi, her beginning to form a way out of this when she knows absolutely she hit John. She knew what she did at the time, and she knew he was dead before she ever found him. That's why I think it's murder too, but I don't think the Commonwealth focused on that evidence at trial, and what the jury heard, I can understand them not finding murder too. But certainly, I don't understand how they could not find the lesser included crimes.
And they never really explained what she needed to find. I mean, I don't know. There was the second-degree murder thing. I think one way you can think about it is if she were just drunk and driving down the road and got into a wreck and someone died, well, then she's guilty of that homicide while intoxicated, but she's not guilty of second-degree murder. Here, the difference is it's like she saw a car and decided to accelerate into it, okay? So then she would still be guilty of second-degree murder because she's doing something on top of her drunkenness that shows that she has this intent not to kill, like Alice said, but to do something so dangerous that if death results, you're held to a higher standard, which is what second-degree murder is. And this case, it's either a really simple second-degree murder because just the fact that she hit the gas the way she did, I mean, I guess that's the proof. Like, she intentionally hit the gas to go 24 miles an hour backwards at him. She did that on purpose, so therefore it's second-degree murder, is your argument. And I think that's probably right. That wasn't an accident. It's not like she was trying to back up, but she was just so drunk. She didn't know her strength. And she accelerated too fast and accidentally hit him. Like, that didn't happen, right? I mean, she decided to hit him. So I guess maybe second-degree murder would... And, you know, when you start thinking about it that way, then it becomes really... She's either guilty of everything or she's guilty of nothing. Because then it really just becomes, did she hit the gas and back up in order to hit him or not? And if she didn't, then she's not guilty, and if she did, she is. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I don't even know if they'll retry on all the counts. The problem with second-degree murder is even if you explain it well, it still adds this aura of greater difficulty that I think gets in some people's heads. I know we've been going a while, Alice, but I do have one more thing I'd like to say about this case. Because I find this case to be very irritating for several reasons. And let me just say, I'm not directing any of these comments at any of you who think the Commonwealth just didn't prove its case. Okay? Like, if you think the Commonwealth just didn't prove its case, I'm not sure I disagree with you. I mean, I think they did prove the case, but the way they presented it was so confused and in such a bad order that I can imagine if this would be hard. If this jury had found her guilty they would have been a really conscientious jury who basically did the job of the prosecution for them. I think at the end of the day, that's what they would have had to have done. So I'm not talking to any of you guys out there, but I do want to address this conspiracy theory just a little bit because there are a few things that I think are interesting about it.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/Wondery.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. I don't know if you knew this, but anyone can get the same premium wireless for $15 a month plan that I've been enjoying. It's not just for celebrities. So do like I did and have one of your assistants switch you to Mint Mobile today. I'm told it's super easy to do at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code Wondery for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code Wondery at checkout.
First, if you want to know what privilege looks like, it's being someone who is wealthy and positioned well enough that you can buy a defense team and a PR team that can co-opt police improprieties that we all know exist, and corruption in the police force that often are directed at communities much different from you, and use that to cover up the fact that you hit your boyfriend in a drunken rage. That is privilege. If it's not privilege, I don't know what is. And I think this case was such an example of, the problem we have in our judicial system, as much as I love it, that if you got a lot of money, you can do a lot of things. And we saw that in this case. The second thing I want to say is I know that some of you have been upset with us because you think we've approached this case in a different way than we have, particularly the theory of the defense, and that we have been biased against it. And the thing I would ask you is, why are you not? It's one thing if you want to believe that the Canton or the Mass Police are corrupt or incompetent. History backs you up, to some extent at least. But that's not the conspiracy, is it? The conspiracy is that a bunch of ordinary people, some of whom happen to be cops, conspired either to attack and kill their friend or, after a tragic accident, decided that rather than calling an ambulance and helping him, they would leave him in the snow to die. And then, as if that wasn't enough, they conspired to frame an innocent woman for his murder. That is not a claim that you are required to believe just as likely as any other theory. You should have a bias against a claim like that. If someone tells you that the earth is flat, your response shouldn't be, could be. You should demand evidence, and a lot of it. You should make them prove their point. This claim in this case, this extraordinary conspiracy, should require a similar level of proof. And there's an important reason for that. This is not fiction. It is not a fun thought experiment without cost. A lot of the cases we cover, the historical cases, our ability to do harm is very low. Not in this case. This was a case where the conspiracy did real, tangible harm. Allie McCabe and Colin Albert were 17 years old when this happened. Colin Albert has been accused by the media of beating a police officer to death. Allie McCabe has been accused of helping him cover it up, of fabricating evidence to protect Colin and to frame Karen Read. Brian Albert Jr., a kid with an anxiety disorder, will never have another birthday again without pain. Jen McCabe not only had her daughter accused of being involved in a murder, but she herself has been painted as a key member of the conspiracy, someone who decided to help kill her friend, John O'Keefe, and then frame her other friend, Karen Read, for his death. The Alberts, the McCabes, entire families slandered as killers. And they are just the beginning. Katie McLaughlin, who is an everyday hero, serving her community as a first responder, who had the misfortune of having gone to the beach a decade ago with a group of friends who included Caitlin Albert, has been branded as a criminal, as someone who would help frame an innocent woman. Chris and Julie Albert, who weren't even there that night, have had their business hammered with one-star reviews by internet crusaders who actually believe they are the good guys. Officer Seraph, Officer Lank, Timothy Nettle, Anthony Fumati, Sarah Levinson, Julie Nagel. The list goes on and on. And think about this. There are a dozen different variations of this conspiracy. In some of them, only some subset of these people are actually involved. 1, 2, a handful, which means that the rest of them are absolutely innocent of any wrongdoing, even if a conspiracy did happen. And yet they have been slandered too. And why? On what basis? Speculation, innuendo, mischaracterized evidence, anomalies with multiple explanations, out and out lies. A couple years ago, we covered the Salem witch trials, and we wondered at the time how something like that could ever happen. But at the same time, we warned that the kind of thinking that led to that tragedy is never far away. And if you ever needed proof that we are still capable of engaging in the same kind of insanity that gripped those people 400 years ago, look no further than the Karen Read trial. So yes, this case makes me angry, and this conspiracy makes me angry because it made so many more victims than just John O'Keefe, and they continue to be victimized to this day.
I will not try to mar the beauty that you just spouted, except to say Karen Read had a choice. This massive conspiracy that she put forward that ruined an entire town and ruined countless lives and continues to do so to this day was not her only path to get off and to present a defense. That is perhaps the most angering thing of all. She didn't go full Monty here because it was her only choice. No, she did this to ruin lives, truly to ruin lives, and she found attorneys to go along with her when there was no evidence to support it whatsoever. We've talked in the past 9 episodes of other theories she could have presented. Would she have been acquitted? Would she have had a hung jury? I can't say yes or no. But they didn't get this hung jury because people bought the conspiracy. They got it because of the media circus and probably because of Proctor's improprieties, which everything Proctor did, none of which we defend, despite how loose he was with his text messaging, he never said anything about a conspiracy. He was just a terrible person who was completely unprofessional. But in none of those texts that crossed all the lines did he ever mention a conspiracy. So this is not about a conspiracy. This is not about the only defense. This is not about a vigorous defense for your client. This was an irresponsible defense. An irresponsible defense that will have repercussions for goodness knows how long. Not just because there's a hung jury and there's continued prosecution, but because the bell cannot be unrung for the 30 or so people more who have been dragged into this for years, whose lives are being torn apart on the internet and by cult-like followings on social media and in the media. That's never going to go away. And some of these people are very young, who are having to probably go through their entire young adult life known as the person who's part of the Karen Read conspiracy cover-up, who killed a cop. And there's just no basis in evidence for any of it. So, we've just talked about the defense. They couldn't have done this alone. It couldn't have caught fire without the kindling of people clicking and feeding this frenzy that is this absolutely unfounded conspiracy. This is what we mean when we say there is responsible consumerism within true crime. It's okay to be interested in these cases. It is our judicial system. It is our humanity we're trying to understand. We obviously have a true crime podcast. We seek to understand why people do some of the worst things they ever do, why people are wrongfully convicted, why people are rightfully convicted. We seek to understand all these things. But this theory would not have reached its insane heights had millions of people not fed it kindling to create this bonfire of cluster. So what you read, what you click on, what you give voice to matters in the courtroom. Maybe in a way now, even more so than it did a decade ago. But you matter, your voice matters, and it has a direct line, essentially, to what all of these other victims now are experiencing in Canton. So think about that. You may take issue with the tone that we had when we started this. It's because we had watched the majority of the trial by the time we started coverage. We had seen the cross-examinations. We had looked at the case files. And if you don't have a little bit of disdain for unfounded accusations lodged at real innocent civilians who could very well be you tomorrow, then you might need to take a step back and think, perhaps I've crossed a line where entertainment and real life have blurred, where responsibility is no longer taken in areas that we need responsibility now more than ever. And that's why perhaps we've had a tone that some of you have thought, well, I don't like that tone. I'm sorry. But I think it's incredibly important because we are all part of what this Karen Read trial became. And the reason we've covered this, we've joked a lot that we didn't really want to cover this. The reason we didn't want to cover it is because we didn't want to give additional kindling to the fire for this kind of unfounded conspiracy theory. But we wanted to give voice to reason because enough of you said, I just don't get it. I don't understand why there is this just media storm out there, and I can't seem to understand why what I'm hearing, which is it seems like a hit and run, is turning into one of the biggest trials of the century. Why is that? That's why we covered the case. And I do think it's important that we did. It was difficult because we saw all the worst parts of true crime come out in this case. And again, it didn't stay on paper. It is so ever in real life. So thank you guys for sticking with us. Those of you who skipped all of these episodes, welcome back after 25,000 hours of Karen Read. But it was important to finish this even though we knew the verdict before we finished recording this, because this case is an exemplar of what can happen in many other cases and what is happening in other cases when there's irresponsible reporting and irresponsible lawyering, frankly. And so this is not even really about Karen Read and the case anymore. We're going to use this as training. Absolutely. I mean, this is going to be an exemplar for many, many lawyers, both defense, prosecutions, law enforcement agencies. And there is something to be learned here. So those of you who've wondered why we continue to record and really record it pretty, at length, that's the reason.
And the one thing I'll say, I'm going to talk about this much longer because we've been talking about it long enough, but Alice, the point she made at the end, law enforcement bears some responsibility here too. Do not take this as us saying that what happened with the state police in Massachusetts, not only in this case, but in the past, that allowed these kinds of conspiracy theories to take root and grow because people had so little faith in them. Frankly, a lack of faith that was confirmed by Trooper Proctor and what he did. That is the fertile ground where this stuff grows. And in this case, unfortunately, it didn't just hurt a prosecution. It hurt a lot of innocent people. So there's a lot of people with blame who can take blame here. But don't let the fact that the police did some bad things mean that everybody else gets off the hook. Don't do that. This case is a disaster and a mess all the way around, and the collateral damage is just beginning and continues to spiral outward. So with that, if you have any thoughts, shoot us an email, prosecutorspod@gmail.com, @prosecutorspod for all your social media. If you leave a 5-star review, we'll answer a question for you, though not tonight, because we've already been going an hour and 45 minutes.
But we finished it.
We did finish it. And that means next week, we will be back with a new case. It's actually another innocence case, so, that'll be fun. That we recorded months ago, because we've had a few cases recorded that we haven't done yet. But New case won't last 9 episodes. I promise you. In fact, it will only last 2. So we've got a few short ones for you coming up because I know you guys like that. And as hard as it is to believe, it'll be October before you know it. So all of you who are coming back, look forward to you leaving again in 2 months when we start the October episodes. So, Alice, we've already said a lot. Do you have anything else you want to add?
No, thank you guys for allowing us to do this for 9 episodes, sticking with us. And I hope you learned something. I know you have thoughts, though.
You know, I think I've said my piece, Alice. I feel good with where we ended up in this case, and I'm sure everyone who listens will agree with us wholeheartedly. So, as I've said before, you can hate us, but we're never going to lie to you. And that includes, we're not going to tell you something just because you want to hear it or just because you really believe it. If you want to come here and get our unvarnished opinions, that's what we give you on The Prosecutors. That's what you're going to get. And sometimes we're going to tell you somebody's innocent, and sometimes we're going to tell you somebody's guilty. And both of those might make you angry. But that's what we're going to do.
I'll tell you this much. Ain't nobody affecting our opinions.
No. Not
Literally, first of all, there's no one paying for our opinions. And second of all, you couldn't pay for our opinions. That's the real joke.
Well, I mean, if you got a couple million, I mean...
I am unviable. Brett has no morals.
And, you know, just to wrap this up, when we say things like, we don't care what you think, we're not going to change our view, we're not saying we don't care about you as a listener. In fact, we care so much about you that we are going to tell you what we think. Always. We're never going to betray that trust with you. So we're not going to do it for ratings or because it's what people want to hear. We're going to tell you what we think. That's what you always get, and that's what you got on this case, and it's what you'll get next week when we're back. But until then, I'm Brett.
And I'm Alice.
And we are The Prosecutors. I'm not going to continue while she's gone, unless you guys just want me to. We can talk about something else. My kids are all asleep, I think, and they're supposed to be. Dog's downstairs. Vicious, package-biting beast. You know, I kept those jeans for forever because I thought, oh, these will be my, knock-around jeans. And then at some point we decided to clean up, and I was like, I need to get rid of these jeans. Now I wish I hadn't done that because I could have shown you my dog tooth destroyed jeans. I mean, they weren't destroyed. I mean, literally, it was just like, it looked like a vampire had attacked me. It was these two, the two fangs. I did afterwards decide I probably should go to the pharmacy. So I did go to the pharmacy and get alcohol and peroxide because I was like, I don't know, does whiskey really do it? Is whiskey strong enough? I just didn't know. So I did go and get it and came back and poured it all in there, which hurt really bad. Kind of cleaned it out and stuff because I didn't want to get an infection because I was literally flying to Austria the next day.